It's my privilege to introduce my colleague, Jason Shaiman, our curator of exhibitions, who will be introducing all of our guests this evening. Jason.
Hi, thank you, Sherry. Welcome, everyone. It's good to have you here. Our final program for the semester. But please note, and if you want to put it on your calendar, that on Saturday, December 11th, the closing day of the exhibition, we will have a reception 2:30 to 4:30 where some of our featured artists will be present, meet and greet, hear them talk about their work in the gallery. So it'll be a wonderful opportunity for everyone and a great celebration of a wonderful exhibition. Before I continue, I would like to take a moment to mention our land acknowledgement. The Miami University Art Museum respectfully acknowledges the Shawnee and Yamia people who, along with other indigenous groups, were the first stewards of the land that the Art Museum and the university now occupies. It's a part of our identity. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers and our moderator for tonight's program. The first of our two speakers this evening is Jeremy Blair, who received a BS in 2006 and an MS in 2007, both in art education. He went on to receive his doctorate from the University of North Texas. Blair is an assistant professor of art education at Tennessee Tech University. Before moving to Tennessee, he worked as a K-12 art teacher in Savannah, Georgia, and a curator at the University of Colorado Art Museum. And Blair exhibits his alternative process photography on a national and level and regularly participates in artist residencies. Our second speaker, and they will be speaking individually and then conversation. Our second is Gary Beeber, a 1971 graduate with a BFA in studio art and communication design. At the time that Gary was a student, it was referred to as graphic design. Beaver is an award-winning photographer and filmmaker who has exhibited in galleries and museums throughout the world. Solo exhibitions include the Generous Miracles Gallery in New York City, also at the Griffin Museum of Photography, among others. Our moderator for this evening is Jon Yamashiro. Jon is a professor of photography here at Miami University. He was born and raised as a third-generation Okinawan American in the cultural pastiche of Honolulu, Hawaii. He received a BFA in 1985 from Washington University in St. Louis, followed by an MFA in 1991 from Indiana University. He began teaching at Miami in 1993. So as a note, as Sherry mentioned, please feel free to provide Q&A and questions in our Q&A or chat, and then we will be moderating those. But at this time, I would like to turn it over to Jon.
Hi, thanks, Jason. Glad to be here. Excited for these talks because on first glance, I mean, the photographs that you'll see are totally different in a sense. But the photographic process is being used. I'm talking to my students about trying to find the similarities between the photographic processes that both these photographers use. They studied at Miami at different generations. The art department was a different art department when Gary was here, and then when Jeremy was here. Photography was not part of their education, but interestingly, they're both making photographs today, which is why they're here, which is really an honor for us to have them speaking tonight. So I don't want to say too much because there's a lot of cool information that's going to be talked about. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to short artist talks and then start with Jeremy. So what I'll do is I'll pass it to Jeremy. Welcome, Jeremy, and you're up.
Cool. Well, I wanted to start with kind of my just very brief kind of Miami story. Thank you for having me tonight, but I actually grew up in Fairfield, Ohio, really close to Oxford. So Miami just made a whole lot of sense for me as a local kid. And my mom worked at Miami at the time while I was in high school and while I was at Miami. And my art teacher graduated from Miami, my high school art teacher. So it made sense to come to Miami, and I was really into drawing and painting, printmaking. I took multiple painting classes and drawing classes with Dana Saulnier and Lon Beck. While I was there, I took printmaking with Ed Montgomery at the Hamilton campus at the time. I took lots of art education courses with Julie Lindsay. So that's kind of the generation that I grew up in at Miami. And while I was there, I was actually also an ecology minor. So in addition to taking art education courses and just general art courses, I was also taking field botany and ecology and a whole group. I think at the time they called it the Miami Plan, where we took things that were beyond our major. And I also got just a minor in it as well. So I had this fascination with how art and nature really intersected. And it took years and years and years later for it to really cash in and actually make sense in my brain. So it kind of planted a seed while I was at Miami. And while I was at Miami too, I didn't take any photography courses that didn't interest me at all. Not interest, it was mainly I was intimidated. I was intimidated by 35 millimeter, by dark rooms, by the new digital cameras that were just coming out while I was in school. And I just wanted to do some woodblock printing. I wanted to go back in time and make art. And things have changed in my own practice a lot since then, but that was kind of my mindset then. And then when I graduated from Miami, I moved to Savannah, Georgia to be an art teacher. So I was a high school art teacher in Savannah, Georgia, right after I graduated from Miami, and I moved away. And one of the things that happened almost right away is I had a class of seniors that I inherited. So I was like the new art teacher. And I had this class of seniors that didn't get to do a lot of the things that they wanted to do with the other art teacher that just retired. So me as the new guy, they kept asking me a million things, like they wanted me to do all this stuff and teach us how to make animations, teach us how to do darkroom photography, teach us how to do all this. Like they expected me to know all these things as the new teacher. So what I did was just said, okay. And I actually worked with our visual arts specialist in Savannah, and she helped me acquire a bunch of kind of hand-me-down photography equipment. So these were just your basic, Bessler enlargers, some photosensitive paper packs, like Ilford packs, some 35 millimeter film, some really cheapo cameras. And we just turned my storage closet into a darkroom. And I didn't know how to do any of it. And this is like right before Google even came out. So there really wasn't a whole lot of just immediate, resources. I had to actually go get a book and stuff to read about these stuff. And I just said, why don't you, as my seniors, teach me how to do darkroom photography? So I gave them the time, I gave them the space, I gave them materials, and they created all kinds of things. So they made pinhole cameras, and they taught me how to actually do pinhole cameras. They made very early versions or very simple versions of photograms, like you would see Man Ray create, decades ago with like the light bulb and the hand. They were making things like that. They were experimenting with developing film. They weren't very good at it because we didn't have like a lot of temperature controls and things like that, but they were like really trying and experimenting a lot. And it got to the point where I started, it wasn't just that they were teaching it to me, as they were like really inspiring me. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like I'm really into this. And it brought back those classes at Miami with those heavy science classes with ecology and botany, and just the idea of experimenting with chemistry. And I could be in a dark room with the red safe light, and I could create something on the page that literally didn't exist. You couldn't see it until I actually put it in that tray of chemicals, and then it would emerge. And then this discovery factor really took over for me. So the image that we're looking at right now, which is called "My Love for You is Stronger Than My Fear of Lizards," I actually made this image maybe it was a couple years after I had worked with those seniors. And this is actually a narrative depiction of one of the first dates I had with my wife many years ago. And we were at a pet store, and a little gecko that was inside of a little glass enclosure like moved a little bit, and I jumped out of my skin like it was the scariest thing of all time. And then I just got inspired of, I bet I could use that photographic process that my students taught me to actually make something, to depict a narrative, to illustrate a story that happened in my life. So this is one of the first versions of that. And this is just an x-ray that these are like for kids, like in science classrooms, kids can use these x-rays of like small pets and things. So I just put this directly on photosensitive paper, included all these other materials as well, and just exposed it with a flashlight, just briefly, and then put it through the developer stop and fixer that's pretty standard in darkroom photography. You can go to the next one for me, Jason. And then I progressed a little bit that year. Like I started like making a lot of work that year. And I think I really needed to tell stories, connect to narratives. There were things happening in my life that I needed to express. And this idea of making a cameraless photograph just made sense with what I wanted to express. And this piece is my wife's, we weren't married yet, but at the time, my wife's uncle passed away very suddenly. And he always teased me for not being a very manly man. And I am a kind of a goofy art teacher guy. And all the men in her family have pocket knives, and they're tough guys, and they smoke cigars. I'm not like that at all. And they would always tease me about not having a pocket knife. And Uncle Jay was one of the biggest people that would tease me. And he actually passed away very suddenly, and very young as well. And I created just this kind of symbol of him. And this is just a pocket knife that I carried around all the time because of him teasing me. And then I found this little feather because he talked and quoted Jonathan Livingston Seagull all the time. So I just made this, piece to just kind of memorialize him. And the original is actually still in his wife's living room right now. So I was taking this art form that was just emerging to me and really figuring out how to tell my story through it. You can hit the next one, Jason. And then I realized that the more of these pieces I make, the more mistakes I make, and the more that don't turn out. And I'm experimenting more with the different chemistry. And I'm typically using like a bathroom to do this process in. And I'm just really figuring out how to mix chemicals still. And I kind of discovered that if I screw up on one, I can just save it and I can cut it up. And then why don't I just collage them together? So what I'll do is I'll take a pile of these like kind of reject photograms that didn't turn out the way I wanted to, and I'll just cut them up into different shapes. And I'll try to tell stories, just through collage even. So some of the most successful pieces I've made over the past decade that have been in a lot of exhibitions and things like that have just been mistakes I've made that I have collaged and glued on top of and just experimented with, post darkroom as well. You can go to the next one. And then this was a turning point for me in 2018, 2019, is I had been using the bathroom or a closet as a darkroom for a long time. And then it kind of dawned on me, I don't know if I saw somebody doing like traditional wet plate photography. I think that's what it was. I think I just saw like a video of traditional wet plate where somebody is outside with the actual hood over top of them. And that like really intrigued me. And I'm like, how could I do the same thing? So I'm out in the world, I'm out in nature, and I can still make the stuff that I love to make. And I'm not stuck in the bathroom, because the bathroom isn't a very efficient place, because oftentimes you need to use the restroom. So if an artist takes over the restroom and creates this bomb of photography stuff, you really can't really use the restroom. So I actually started using a camping tent. So an actual like tent, like a Coleman tent that you zip up. And I would set that tent up in the backyard, and I would outfit it with black fabric. I would spray like Flex Seal on it to like just try to put kind of a light tight sense to it. It's never gonna be fully light tight, but I tried to make like the darkest mobile darkroom that I could. So basically I outfitted just a normal tent and turned it into a mobile darkroom. And then I started going outside and collecting things. And this was a turning point for me too. In addition to the tent, is I started foraging, like literally like going into the forest and looking for items and materials and textures. And I'm literally looking for like the coolest leaf I can find. And this is like taking me back to when I was like 5 years old. And this was when I was 5 was when the first cicada invasion in my life happened in Southern Ohio. And I remember collecting all the little cicada shells, and collecting rocks and things when I was a kid. So I'll literally walk around the backyard, collect items, go into the tent, and I have trays set up in the tent. And I have my developer chemical, I have the stop chemical, and my fixer chemical are all in the tent. It is a true mobile darkroom. I even have a mechanic's flashlight that I have duct taped a safe light filter to. So I'm turning that on so I can see everything using this safe light. And it's absolutely ridiculous. I always think the cops are going to be like knocking on the tent, wondering what the heck I'm doing in there. And then it just kind of revolutionized the way that I make art to be outside. So to be very site-based. So this led to me doing residencies. And I didn't know that going to someone else's property far away from my own home and just like learning the land and walking around and connecting with nature, I didn't know that was such an important process to me. But it brought me back to my Miami, where I was so into the field botany and walking around the forest and recording my thoughts and things. So from that process led to multiple residencies, which helped me create actually hundreds of works. Versus in my bathroom, I was really limited to the amount of works I could produce. And then things got to be a little more unique. I was able to transform materials. So like in the image here, I'm actually trying to transform these organic materials into something totally different and not just trying to document the material. So like with the pocket knife, I'm just trying to document what the pocket knife and feather look like. And here I'm really trying to transform it into something else completely. You can go to the next image for me. And then this is the piece that's currently in the Miami University Art Museum right now called Meridian. So I was able, and I got into like thinking that these are truly unique works, meaning I don't reproduce them. I do not edit them. So each piece that I make stands alone, and I do not blow them up or anything. And I always thought that I would be, manipulating my pieces in the past. And then just trying to really transform materials, and pieces like this led to having a solo exhibition near where I live now in Tennessee. So it just really changed my perspective on art making, being able to be very site-based, to go on to different properties, to search for different things. I've found all kinds of wild things while I'm on these residencies. I've found like skunk carcasses and just all kinds of things that are actually in the work as well. You can go to the next image, which will be our last image. And then this one I just created this past June. I was at a residency in North Carolina, and the goal was more about telling a personal narrative. And then while I was trying to tell this personal narrative through making this piece, I really got stuck in the like ritual of art making. So instead of worrying so much about telling my story again, it's just like getting in the tent, what just feels like home, and making things, and that ritual of making things has really taken over. And I think it's taken years for me to get good at this process for it to become kind of like this ritual. So then what I really am into the most recently is reimagining materials instead of that documentation. So when you look at this piece, this is actually a bunch of pink insulation from an abandoned building that I found. So I actually like dug it out of the wall and pulled it out. And I also used a bunch of river rocks. So this is like maybe 4 different exposures where I'm putting the piece of a plain photosensitive paper on the floor of the tent, and then I'll put the insulation on top of it. And then I'll do a quick exposure with a little LED flashlight, like a really quick, like 1 second. Then I'll move the insulation around, expose it again really quickly. Then I'll put move the insulation off of the paper, put some river rocks on it that I found in the river or creek nearby, do another exposure on the same piece of paper, move those rocks again, and then put the insulation back on and do another exposure. So this is actually like a quadruple exposure. So all these different forms and textures are overlapping in all these ways that you literally have no idea what's going to happen until you actually put it into the developer and actually watch it happen. And I'll see things kind of turning in the tray. And once it's about like 30% developed and I can start to see the image form, I'll literally just pull it out and leave the chemical kind of filmed on top of the paper and just let it sit back on the ground. I don't want it to just fully develop yet. And I might put things back on the paper again, like I might put the rocks back on it again and expose it again even, and just let it develop with film over top of it instead of letting it submerge in the tray. So there's all kinds of like weird experiments I'm doing with the chemistry, and the chemicals get really dirty. There's all kinds of light leaks that are happening in the tent. There's all kinds of stuff that's happened. I'm using actual water from the creek that's nearby. I'm not using any special water. I'm not controlling the temperature of anything. And I'm just letting all of these variables really create the piece that you see here. So that is basically my process and my little art talk.
That's awesome. Should I say something now, Jason? I can't see you in there. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Before we move on to Gary's pieces, I just wanted to make short comments here, if possible. Is that okay? Yeah. So I mean, I love that these are all unique pieces, Jeremy. That's pretty awesome. But I also love how like your physical process, sort of affected your creative and conceptual process, right? And vice versa. Sort of this cycle of like you actually physically making and dealing with things, and then it affecting how you think about things and your narrative, how you tell that story. And then it comes back around again where sort of things start to change, multiple exposures and all that. And it's really awesome, I think. Pretty cool. Congratulations. That's really great.
Thank you. Yeah, the physical, I think the physical part of it, I think that's what I mean, kind of the ritual, the actual moving things around, the collecting, the foraging.
Right.
That's 10 times more important than the final. I really don't care that much about the final print. Like I like it. I like looking at it. But that process, the physical process was really important.
Well, it becomes a document of that, right? Which is what photography has done for years, right? It documents sort of that process. But also, it's just that your journey actually, you know, through science and all that too, and how it affected the way you saw things at certain points is interesting when we think about sort of our education at Miami University being liberal arts education. So other classes affecting the way we think about things, right? Which brings us back to Miami, I guess. But then, so now I guess we should move on to Gary. Gary, you're out there. So Gary, you ready to go?
I'm here. I'm ready.
Okay, there you go. You're on, bud.
Okay, I'm on. I see you. John, I see you, not me. I'm on.
You're on, Gary. We can all hear you.
Okay. So when I went to Miami, there was no photography. There was no photography department whatsoever. And when I went there, when I went there, I mean, there was no internet. There were no personal computers. and there were no photography courses at Miami at that time. And I was always into photography. I think when I was something like about 13 years old, my dad bought me a little camera and I started fooling around with it. And I have just always been into photography. When I went to Miami, what I learned was painting, and I learned some design. Design at Miami was in its infancy. And the teacher that I really loved was Edwin Fullwider. And I learned to paint from him. I learned to do watercolor from him. And I also studied with Cross and Curry, and I learned drawing from him. So I had a really good education at Miami. I really learned about painting and drawing and art history, and I've always loved art history. And that's been useful in my photography now, because I sometimes base my pictures on classical imagery. I'm going to make it kind of brief, because you can look, I've done a lot of stuff, and you can look at my my resume. You can go to my website, GaryBeeber.com. So in any event, this picture, well, I'm kind of a hunter-gatherer, and I don't always specifically go to know what I'm going to find. And this was after the tornado a few years ago in Dayton. And I wanted to check out what happened. And I found this what was a drive-in restaurant on North Main Street. And I was just, it just struck me, the verticals and the horizontals. And I also was very interested in the really famous French photographer named Eugene Atget. And he was in the late 1800s, or the early 1900s, I believe. And he got his color through the printing process. And I like that color so much, I figured out how to do that. And I do it all with computers. I've been using computers really since they came out. I've been using a Macintosh. And I think my first Macintosh had an 80 megabyte hard drive and very, very little memory. So let's continue on to with the next picture. This is a fairly recent photograph. Kind of what I'm showing you are some of my greatest hits. And this, I was just walking in this neighborhood with my dog, and I just came upon this jaguar that had been abandoned in an abandoned basketball court. And I wonder, what in the hell is this? Why would anybody abandon a car like this? And so I've been doing what I always do. I go back different times of year, different times of day, and I take pictures. And that's and then, you know, I wonder about the people who own that car, and I wondered about the people who abandoned it. So shall we go on to the next picture? I also like to do a series, and this series is several shows. It's including one at the Griffin Museum of Photography, and it's going on to 2 more exhibitions, one at the Praxis Photography Gallery in Minneapolis, and it's also going to Providence, Rhode Island. And I find this fascinating. This is from Sylvester Manor. And what Sylvester Manor is it really blew my mind. I lived in Sag Harbor, New York for many, many years. And I came to Shelter Island every so often, and I would drive by this place. I didn't have any idea what it was. There was just these big, white, imposing gates. And finally, I read a book I was introduced to a book about Sylvester Manor, and I went to check it out. And Sylvester Manor interested me because what it was a plantation that was founded in the early 1600s on Shelter Island, which is in New York State. And it was farmed by slaves. They were slave holders. And I have found all these just incredible, bizarre things there. And I just like to go back and photograph. So I photograph this in all different times of day and different seasons. And I'm going back to photograph once again this coming December 24th, I believe. So you want to go on to the next one? So I like to find, I find all these things. And this was near where I lived in Long Island, there was this horse show, the Hampton Classic Horse Show. And the Hampton Classic Horse Show, I don't know, it must be like 50 acres of land. And they only use it for 1 week of every year at the end of the summer for the Hampton Classic Horse Show. And I just thought this was so odd. I have no idea what it's used for. And it just struck my fancy, and I took the shot. Now, when I take a picture, I don't just take the one shot and walk away in one sitting. I'll sometimes do as many as 100 photographs, and from different angles. And the thing isn't to do a lot of photographs. The thing is to keep finding different things as I take the picture. So shall we go on to the next one? This was also on Shelter Island, and it's right next door to Sylvester Manor. And you would pass it by. If you didn't know, you probably wouldn't know what it was and pass it by. But what it is it's a very old Catholic cemetery. And it's a little cemetery, and it's beautifully kept. And I walked through the cemetery, and I found these what I take to be saints that were statues. And so I took the picture, and I've been back there several times as well. So let's go to the next one. This is from our swimming pool. We moved to Ohio 4 years ago, and the first thing that I wanted to do when we moved here was take out that slide. It wasn't appealing to me at all. And then I started to notice how it would change. It was almost organic, and it changes at different times of the day, at different times of night. And in the summer, I go out and I shoot in the wintertime too. But in the summer, particularly, I like to go out when I take the dog out. And the dog always, for some reason, wants to be in the picture. He gets himself in the picture. And this, I just thought this was such an odd shot, and I took it. And this has been exhibited in an awful lot of places. And it's sold numerous times. So shall we go on? I think you have one more. Do we have one more? No, that's it. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Are we at a point where we're all going to be on the screen? Okay. That's also actually what I loved about that work, Gary, is that there's an amazing sense of humor that you have that's evident in the work. And I was giggling at all of the photographs actually, because I could just see it, and we talked about hunter and gatherer, but I also love the sort of combination of, well, intersection of the man-made and organic sort of elements in your photographs, right? And sort of, I think that Jeremy includes elements of that too in his work. So the intersection of sort of man-made objects, so man-created objects, and sort of the organic, plants or flowers and things are collecting. So there's sort of a you're connected that way, I think. What do you think?
I would say that I often take pictures of things I find humorous. And
Yeah.
why not give people a little humor? I mean, things have been so sad, and how the world is now. I kind of like that, and I think many pictures that I take are humorous. I used to like to take pictures of things like Dachau concentration camp, and that wasn't humorous. In fact, I have one story. I had a show of my Dachau concentration camp images, and the Dachau concentration camp, they had little markers where the prisoners' barracks were for each marker, and I found one that was number 1. And I had put a little stone on top of it, like it was like one might do at a graveyard on a grave, to kind of show that I was there. And that was in the show. And somebody bought the piece because they thought that meant that we're number 1. I mean, what can I say? But I mean, I usually, my work isn't so dark. It's usually pretty light.
Yeah.
And then I haven't shown any people I do at all, but I like to get into people's heads when I take their picture, and I like to show their humanity.
Yeah. The story, the narrative, they're evident in the photographs, I think, right? So there's a story there. There's a story there. There's always a story there in the photographs that you're making. There's sort of a narrative, and it's interesting, sort of funny take on a situation. But I guess somebody asked in the chat there about, like, if you carry your camera with you everywhere you go. And I may know the answer to this, but I'll ask you that. Do you carry the camera with you everywhere you go, and just to find things, or not?
Well, I like to take my camera with me wherever I go. However, sometimes I can't, but I always have my cell phone. And I have a 12, whatever it is, and the imagery is so high res that I get oftentimes great pictures with that. And whenever I see something, I will go and I'll take, when I find it, if I'm driving, I'll pull over and take the shot. So I'm always loaded, whoever asked.
You just can't help it. Yeah, you're always loaded. But
no,
actually,
I found today a solitary sign on the road that just said Jesus. So I parked and I got out and I shot it. I've had trouble before because I've been places where I've been chased out. And one thing I can tell you, when somebody comes at you with a gun, then you just shut up and you say, yes, sir, and you leave. And that's happened to me several times.
Yeah, that's good advice. But I was thinking, though, that, like, for Jeremy's work, I mean, it's a lot of work to get prepared to do what you do. So it's not like you can just one day just go and do it, right? There's a lot of preparation involved, and they become projects. And I think with Gary, with your work too, you travel to special places to photograph that place, or photograph a person portraits, stuff like that. So both of you kind of work like that in sort of these projects, right? Project oriented way. Is that right, Jeremy?
I definitely do. The way I work typically is I do a ton of work over the summer because I'm not teaching classes, and I have a lot more free time. And I'll typically try to get a residency so that might take months to apply for multiple residencies to try to get into one. So there's a lot of work during the school year to try to actually schedule. So I don't just say, well, I want to make art today, and then I wake up and then I set everything up. It's usually months worth of work. So I'll make probably 300 pieces over the summer, and then I will photograph or scan those pieces just to document them. And then I will apply to exhibitions, I'll apply to residencies, I'll apply to opportunities with those new works. And then I'll start all over the next summer and make 300 more and farm those out into different things. So it's typically work a ton over the summer and then use those new works of art throughout the year to find more opportunities.
Right. So the way you're working too, is there anything, there's a question I have actually. Was there anything that you might have through the process, right? Because you're preparing and you're spending like all this time doing this, right? Like months. Is there something during the process that you've learned that you take to the next project, I guess? The next time you do this, you learn that from this one and you take that to the next one. So you're sort of always climbing this creative ladder or whatever, you know?
I think so. Like, when you're by yourself in the middle of nowhere in North Carolina for 2 weeks and you're just making by yourself in the forest, you get to think a lot. I write a lot of notes down. I come up with lots of new ideas, and I literally say next time. And then I have this notebook that's filled of next time ideas, and I'll try things out throughout the year a little bit to kind of prototype. And then when I hopefully get a residency or I have scheduled out a major opportunity where I'm going to create, I will test out those ideas for sure. So like the insulation was one of them where I was like, I bet that material would work amazing with these conditions, but I didn't know. So I wrote that down. I even brought some to just prototype with that year. And then I figured out how to use it well. And then I try to find that material again when I work.
Right. I mean, the idea is that you've got something, but the idea is the work keeps growing, right? As you go along in time. And I wonder if Gary, I wonder if Gary, you found that to be the case with your work in terms of what you're photographing and how you're photographing, what you're seeing.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I mean, it's always a learning process, right? When you're out photographing. And I'm wondering if they're like, you might have seen something a certain way one time and then sort of it stuck with you. And next time you went out and photographed a different subject or something like that. So the years, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think definitely. And often I'll go back to the same place many times. Sometimes what I was photographing isn't even there anymore.
Right.
But I don't know, different things remind me of other things. And I suppose I just see things that I find interesting to me, and I just those things grab me.
So maybe I'll ask you this question: what's driving that, you think, for you?
That's a great question, and I wish I had a great answer for you. I don't know. I mean, it's just I love taking pictures almost more than anything else. I love it. It's very exciting for me. It's very liberating, and I just love it. And I find things that sometimes are amusing, and sometimes they have other meanings. Often they have other meanings.
Sure, you don't know at the time, but yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say a lot of times I don't know what I'll find, but I know where to look.
But it's that discovery maybe of something new, right? That's around the corner that you just can't handle it. You have to go.
I've been to Sylvester Manor maybe 15 times. A guide there said that I could give a tour there because I know so much about the place. I'll go back. Well, I'm going back soon, and believe me, I'll find things that I didn't find before.
Yeah. Well, of course, time has changed things too, and that's an important part of your work also, right?
The seasons
Yeah.
change, and sometimes something will be covered up with weeds that I didn't even see at all till the winter time.
Yeah.
I can respond to that question too, John.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Because I'm inspired by Gary's answer.
Yeah.
For me, what keeps me coming back to it is like this discovery factor. Like as a art teacher, as a K through 12, former K through 12 teacher, seeing a child, you know, mix red and yellow for the first time and they don't know what's going to happen is like magic to an art teacher. And like especially in the last image we looked at from mine, you know, with the insulation and the rocks combined, I had zero idea what it would look like. Zero. So I'm doing all these exposures with all these materials. I have no idea how they'll combined. And that if I knew what was going to happen, I would never want to do it, you know? So this process is just so dependent on discovery and experimentation, you know, and that's what keeps me back, even though it is not a convenient process to.
Well, it's a brave thing to do too, right? Because you've had success, right? And now you're going to a place where you're not sure of the results. That can be kind of a scary place to be. Do you know what I'm saying? Is this going to work even, you know? Am I going to totally suck it up here, you know? And but that's the adventure, I think.
I think
it's nerve-wracking pulling up to
I think you shouldn't be afraid to fuck things up. You know, I really think you gotta go for it.
Yeah.
I don't think you should ever worry about that. I think you gotta go for it. And the more you do, the more you learn.
It is very nerve-wracking pulling up to a property in rural Tennessee to do a residency and nobody knows you, and you have a big tent and a bunch of chemicals in the back of your car, and you've kind of shown what you can do. Can you replicate it at this? Because it's very unique chemistry. You never know what will happen, especially when you're literally out in the field. So I've pulled up to these properties before, like with nerves in my belly. Like, am I going to pull this off or not? You know? Right.
Yeah. And then you just have to go. It's like jumping into the darkness, right? You jump into the darkness, knowing that there's something there, trusting yourself. I love that.
Well, I don't always come up with something. So, and you know, not only that, but a lot of times when I take something, maybe it isn't that good. I just am going with my feeling at the moment.
Yeah, well,
I don't make a masterpiece a day. I mean, I try to go for it. You know, you try to hit that home run, but it doesn't always happen, and you can't be afraid of failure.
Right. Perfect. I mean, and students should know that too. It's not like you go out and make a greatest hits album right away, right? You got to work at it, and you're working hard and making a lot of things, and there are a lot of failures along the way, and you learn from that, but you got to do it.
And I'm going to tell the students something else.
Go ahead.
You don't, excuse me for being so blunt, but you can't get anywhere in the art world unless you're willing to make sacrifices and you're willing to work your ass off.
Yeah. And you know, that's not always the what people think artists do, right? People think artists don't work. They just do something and it works. I think is a preconception of sort of what artists do, right? Maybe we don't work as hard as other people, and we don't study as hard.
They don't know. People don't know.
Yeah. So students, it is hard work, and you don't hit it out of the ballpark right away. You may not ever for years, right?
It depends. I think what you have to do as an artist, you have to follow your dream, or else you'll never know if you could do it or not. And you know, I mean, some artists, they make it after they die.
Yeah, it's a little depressing to think about it that way, though.
But it's the way it is.
Yeah.
Everybody is on their own journey. Jeremy is on his journey. I'm on mine. You're on yours.
Right. Awesome. Oh, let me see. We have more questions here from the audience. Actually, there's one here. Can you name specific photographers who have inspired you? Gary, you have a couple besides
Yeah.
Ajay?
I have many. Eugene Otjay, it's Atget. Look him up. Look him up. I loved, you know, when I worked for Aperture once, Aperture magazine. I was a designer. I was a designer for many years. I worked at the Museum of Modern Art. I worked at the Whitney. I worked at Aperture, and I did the interior of the Minor White book, which you can still get. Minor White. I love that guy's work.
Yeah. Which book?
Um,
You remember what it was called? Rites of
yeah,
Passage. That was a big one.
I got it right here, dude. I'll try to make it quick. Oh, well, I can't find it, but right now, but I recommend this book. I don't know if you can see it,
Yeah.
by about Eugene Otjay. I
Yeah.
love this guy's work.
Right. You know, in your work too, I see a little bit, I see like Lee Friedlander, those street photographers,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Yeah, Papa
I'm
George.
not a very good street photographer, but I thank you for that.
Well,
And I
no,
love,
definitely, because they're
I love Robert Frank.
definitely
Check
classic.
that guy out. And I collect too. I've collected all my life.
Right.
And I have some nice photographs.
How about Jeremy? Can you name specific artists?
The three that pop into my head right away that are like kind of Mount Rushmore type of artists would be like Man Ray. I love the simplicity of the photogram kind of technique that he uses. Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, just not just for his, he didn't really do a whole lot of photograms. He did some, but just his work in general is really inspiring. And then my wife, who's an art historian, actually introduced me to Nadar, the aerial photographer. And I have a whole book that I read cover to cover about him, just an absolutely fascinating life. The work's fascinating, the personality, and I just love the origins of photography. And I think that's where my love for photograms has really started, is the early 1900s. And there are plenty of artists that have developed it and moved the art form forward. But I always go back to kind of those central figures from the earlier 1900s or late 1800s.
Yeah, because it was amazing back then, the processes that they were sort of experimenting with, and to like push that process forward at the time was pretty amazing. You know, the things that they did.
Mm-hmm.
Photographing from an air balloon, give me a break. You know,
Yeah,
that's like,
with all that equipment. And
right. He didn't have a camera. I mean, not a camera, a phone. It was like one of those like huge, you know, using wet plate, maybe even.
Yeah, that's what it looked. That's what it was.
Yeah,
pretty amazing.
Crazy.
Yeah, so now I'm using a tent with a dark room inside of it, you know. So there's just lots of little connections I was making with his story that are fascinating to me.
Right. Awesome. So I think we're nearing the end here. Is there any last words, Gary, that you want to tell the students or let the public know about you?
Well,
or
I'll tell you, any student that would like to ask me any questions is free to write me. I'm happy to see if I can be of help.
Well,
I think the thing is like, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? The answer is practice.
practice. Which should be fun, which should be like a challenging sort of thing to do. And those little discoveries become really fun, right? When you find something, leads you to the next thing. Okay, Jeremy, you have any
Sure.
last words? Or
I would echo what Gary said. I mean, I think mentorship is huge in the arts. And I've had a winding road to get to where I am today. So Miami, of course, prepared me, gave me a really nice foundation. But I've discovered a million things since I've left Miami. So don't think that what you learn in college is what you're going to be moving forward with. You know, it's just a start. So all the artwork I make today that I really love doing, and it's very satisfying. I didn't pick it up until I was a practicing teacher. And so just, you know, be open, be curious, and surround yourself with people that are very like-minded as well.
Right. Cool. Don't be afraid. This is just the beginning, right? Anything else, Jason?
Also, I would say sacrifice, you know, to buy that good camera or that good iPhone or that good computer, sacrifice to do it because it'll pay off.
Actually, when you say sacrifice, even time, sacrifice time. I mean, do it. Spend the time doing it, right?
I mean, when I lived in New York City for many years, and I met people that really sacrificed to be able to live the life they wanted to do, lived in tiny little apartments with a bathroom in the hall just to be able to do what they wanted to do.
You know, I want to ask you a question. I was talking to my students today about the 80s, sort of the 80s in New York, the 80s and 90s when they had the, you know, the culture wars were happening, and there are artists like Robert Mapplethorpe and Cindy Sherman was sort of coming up, and photography was really becoming a part of the art world as opposed to just, you know, photographs, whatever, you know, and documentary work and stuff. Can you give us a feel of what it was like in New York at that time?
I'd have to say that it was a little scary. When I came to New York, you would see junkies that were like they needed their fix, and they'd be collapsing on the sidewalk. I'd see things like, I mean, in New York, there was a lot of crime. I've done a lot of work at Coney Island too. And that was a place back then, you had to watch your back if you went to take pictures there. I think that I've known a lot of famous photographers. I've known Andre Serrano. I've known quite a few others, and some of them have become very big and very famous. And I think at one point, photography, during that point, I think that photography became recognized and as art, because I think for a while it was the little brother, and but I think it became what it is.
Yeah, and those artists were walking the streets of New York at that time, right? You know, and that's why it's so fascinating.
I just think like I said, it was dangerous.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. Anything else? Are we done? 7 o'clock. Jason, how are we doing?
I think we are good. We are at 7 o'clock. Amazing conversations and discussions. It's
yeah, I just want to thank. Well, I want to thank Gary and Jeremy too. It was really cool to get to know you guys. Yeah, and you know, the more stories. Probably could start conversations and talk for hours, maybe. But I love it. I love the work. I think it's amazing. Go see it if you haven't seen it.
I will be there. I'll see you guys. I'll see more of you. Unfortunately, Jeremy, it's going to be a little hard to see you, but
yeah,
Jason,
I'll be in Tennessee.
Jeremy, are you coming down? Are you coming down? Gary, are you coming down for the closing, Gary?
I'm going to try to. If not, I will certainly be there to pick up my picture. I'll certainly be there, and we'll get together. We'll all get together. I hope to be at Miami much more now.
Awesome.
Just be sure to keep the conversation going. I hope Gary and Jeremy and John, the three of you, can keep in touch and, you know, keep the conversation going.
Hey, always great to talk about photography and art and creativity.
I might be at Craft Summer coming up too. So
excellent.
If I end up coming for Craft Summer, I'll reach out and connect.
That's great. Very good. Look forward to it. Thank
Thank
you
you
all
all.
so much for a fantastic final program for the semester.
Have a good
Thanks,
night.
Sherry, for all your tech work.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Good night, everybody.
Are we leaving? Okay.